This is a bottle of mead, which I made by myself. This is vodka, made in France. This is cherry wine, made by my mother. This is liquor, made in Germany. And this is tequila, from Mexico. What do we all have in common? They're all made from yeast. It is said that the first humans used yeast to make beer instead of bread. But did we know what was going on back then? Did we know that yeast was eating up the sugar to make alcohol? We didn't. Not at first, anyways. Thousands of years ago, humans started dabbling in agriculture. By planting and growing our own food, we were able to flourish and get more things done. However, at this point in time, humans knew nothing about biology or planting or agriculture or anything. So we were just throwing things at the wall and seeing what would stick. Eventually, we threw enough of the right things at the wall to accidentally discover fermentation, which led to us creating our very first beer. A few hundred years later, and beer became the world's biggest cultural phenomenon. Egyptians would get buried with their beer. People would drink alcohol constantly. At some point in time, beer even became an acceptable form of currency. As people tried to put more and more things into containers to see what would turn out, they grew their understanding of biology and the natural world, completely by accident. But that's all it really was back then, an accident. People had no understanding of yeast and fermentation. They just knew that if they left enough sugary things in a container for long enough, they would make an alcoholic drink. However, in this way, ancient people were doing science without even knowing it. They would keep on testing things, without having even the slightest clue of the biological mechanisms at play. But that was then. In modern days, we have a very good understanding of what happens when you ferment something. When I made my first bottle of mead a couple of months ago, I felt two things. Firstly, I felt connected with biology, because obviously, I'm having yeast do my bidding here. But secondly, I also felt connected to humanity. See, I personally grew up with watching my parents ferment all kinds of things. They would put cherries in jars, they would put cucumbers in there, they would just ferment it, and I would be waiting to see what would happen to it. Not only this though, but when I make alcohol, I feel like I'm contributing to the curiosity which almost every single person before me has had. With that being said, let's go make some mead. The first step to any good brew is gathering your ingredients. Luckily, mead is probably the easiest drink in the world to make. All you need is a jar, some honey, water, and some yeast. Second step is to set up the apparatus. All that you gotta do is put the airlock into the conveniently cut out hole on the top of your jar, cover that thing in tape, and you're good to go. On to step 3, which is putting the honey into the jar. The first time I made this, I put in way too much honey, and it made a drink which was far too alcoholic. So this time, a bit less than a third should work just fine. Step 4 is going to be to rehydrate the yeast by putting it into some nice warm water to wake it up. We do this because the yeast has been dormant for a very long time, and to give them some time to get used to warmer water, we put them in here. While we wait for the yeast to rehydrate, which should be in about 10 minutes, we'll move on to step 5, which is pouring in warm water to the top. Keep in mind though, if the water is too hot, it will denature the enzymes in the honey, which gives it all its good tastes. So just leave some boiling water on the counter for a bit, and then pour it in. Once you've added your water and stirred it around, you can do step 6, which is adding in the yeast. Now that you've pretty much finished making it, you can put on the lid and do the final step, which is to cuddle it up in a blanket like it's your firstborn, put a label on him to not get him confused with the other mead at the hospital nursery, and put him somewhere warm so he can ferment for a couple of weeks. Whew. Once that's all done, you'll have made yourself a nice glass of mead that you can be proud of. Just make sure to always drink in moderation. Thank you for watching.